What's up and welcome back to another ProGuides Apex Legends video. My name is Zephyr and today we're going to be taking a look at the 12 best tips for the early game. But before we do that, let's jump to our question of the day. What is your preferred playstyle and why? Leave your answer in the comments below. Number 1. At the beginning of every game, it's the usual struggle, where to land and what to look out for. Generally, you can look at things from different points of view. If you're able to see floor loot, you'll know what you're going to get, but when you attempt opening bins, it's always the thrill of the gamble. What will you find, and is it even something that you can use? Especially during a hot drop, trying to flip the bins can come at a heavy cost. Here, it's important to briefly talk about what type of player you are. Are you sweating for every bit of your RP? Then maybe inconsistent hot dropping is not going to be what you want to do. Much more than that, you'd rather look to try and loot rather uncontested POIs and then slowly play for the placements. Unless you have the aim to back it up. But even then, it's still going to be super inconsistent to get tons of KP on drop. Next up, you want to combine the idea of the first tip with the following. Knowing about decent floor loot or even great bin locations with access to insane vantage points can be the early game carry you need. Gearing up for your first fight there will enable you to farm free KP during your initial exchange without exposing yourself to too much risk. For this, I want to put emphasis on one thing again. Look for high ground as often as possible during the early game. You don't want to be stuck below while being gunned down from above. It feels awful, and unless you're literally an aim god, you're not going to do anything. The other way around, of course, is going to present you with ample opportunities to always capitalize on. If you find it troublesome to get a consistent early game, we're more than delighted to help you out with that. Check out our coaches over at ProGuides.com. We'll make sure to elevate you to the next level. Number 3. This tip is often forgotten, but it's one of the most important ones you need to know and remember at all times. Fighting in this game, especially in Kings Canyon, needs to be done fast. You don't want to linger around or fight a war of attrition unless you're literally against the very last squad and already have them boxed in. Extending fights is almost never a good idea. Third parties are going to roll up on you and you'll be stuck in a very poor position when that happens. Beating them ASAP prevents this from happening and also allows you to catch a small break to loot up and prepare for the next play. Number 4. This tip is all about transitioning your weapon choices from the early game. Obviously, we want to pick up any weapon we find unless you prefer jump kicks and fist fighting. Being stuck with a Mozambique or P2020 seems really awful, but sometimes there isn't anything left, so you're forced to go with them. There are plenty of great options, but guns such as the Peacekeeper, 301, or Wingman will always provide immense value to you, whatever stage of the game we're talking about. But yet again, if you happen to be stuck with lower tier weapons, make sure to look for replacements as fast as you can. Number 5. This tip might sound kind of weird at first, but it's mandatory to turn you into a better player. Before you jump into ranked games and play for RP by ratting or exclusively playing Circle, try to constantly fight in the normal modes to get a feeling and an overall understanding of the game. You can hit Diamond without doing too much gameplay wise, but you'll always struggle every time you get into the late game if you don't master this. Learning about your Legend's unique movement patterns, speed, and overall handling of weapons while implementing movement is just the underlying foundation that every pro Apex player has built up over time. By just spamming ranked and sweating for RP, you're going to have very little practice in that specific sense, since obviously you're not trying to take all the fights because losing them would impact your RP gains. Therefore, hop into normal pubs and sincerely, just W key enemy teams. By building up not only experience but the confidence behind yourself, you'll be finding your way to first place more often in your actual games. And obviously, if you want to learn that in the fastest way possible, our coaches at ProGuides would love to help you out. Number 6. The next tip is about you as a human. More than often enough, we underestimate the enemy's ability to respond to our plays. The same happens when we hot drop and we believe that we can fight anybody and win. Whatever fight you take, you should never treat anybody as if they're terrible. For that, you need to read cues and come to a conclusion regarding the skill level you're actually up against. Take the time and listen to their movement, their way of shooting, the speed at which they rotate, and many other things. Once you figure that out, think about the optimal play available to them and prepare for that. Remember, it's always about leaving as little room as possible to get surprised. Number 7. Choose POIs according to the legends you play or have on your team. Having Caustic Trap available at bunker or stairways is multiple times more effective than having an Octane running around at full speed. It may not come to your surprise that the qualities of a legend that loves trapping and fortifying places vastly outperforms a mobility legend indoors. It's a subtle thing, but it'll surely help you over the course of your many games if you apply it to your decision making. Generally ask yourself, what is your legend good at and what does it truly hate the most? Then, think about the available POIs and choose the one that fits your style of play. Number 8. When it comes to outplaying people, the early game is the perfect time to pull off a quick wipe as they're usually busy looting and getting the gist of the situation they're in. You use that moment to capitalize on the team's lack of preparation to play towards your personal strengths. Using mobility in the form of wall bouncing is powerful and especially brutal if you combine it with tap strafing and other movement mechanics that you can think of, even legend-specific ones like Valk's jetpack. Just make sure not to go too fast and don't overforce the issue. Even if you're insane, it's always hard to fight 3 people at the same time. Therefore, use your movement tech to get yourself enough space to avoid uneven fighting conditions. Challenge them to temporary 1v1s and whittle them down. In this scenario, it is enough to crack or down them. Don't go for the full thirst. You won't have enough time for that, so focus on your next battle. Number 9. The following tip is valuable throughout the game, but it starts at the very beginning. Pick up your grenades. In the early game itself, they might not be the most powerful tool, but you can still use them to your advantage. As you're being chased down, you can throw a grenade into the sky right above you in expectation of the enemy squad members just running into it as it drops down. They don't have the nade indicator and therefore will be immediately hit by the blast and either lose a major amount of HP and shield, or they'll just straight up die depending on their resources. Next to that, you can use nades to make them move out of cover. With this in mind, you can accelerate a fight's pace. Rather than looking at each other in the eyes while hiding behind that box, you can turn that fixture into a death trap by hitting a well-placed thermal. Don't undervalue your tools. They can make, break, and grief a fight at any point in the game. Number 10. The next tip is about baiting people into third partying. Remember when we talked about not trying to fight for too long? To make sure this works as intended, you should ideally do it with a full squad and a substantial amount of ammo. With the POIs being so close to each other, people will try to land towards hot drop locations in order to be the third party every time. That right there is exactly what you want to make use of. Once the fight's cooled down a bit and you've had enough time to loot your respective POIs, you can start shooting into the air a bit with different weapons. Let your squad mates do the same thing and keep it up for a little bit. It's not the most efficient way of farming KP, but it surely can work in the situation you might find yourself in. Be creative and think outside the box. Number 11. This tip is about not dropping too far away from your teammates. You don't want to share the same building, but you want to be close enough so you can respond to action within an instant. With that, you might cover a smaller area in terms of looting, but you'll greatly increase your chances of surviving the early game, plus taking away some early KP for free. It is a team game after all. To make sure you can do that, you can mark the exact point where you want to drop down as an individual. If your mates do the same, you can already create a mental note for yourself with which you'll be able to somewhat anticipate future scenarios. Number 12. What if I told you you're healing at the wrong times? You should always remember that you don't need to syringe every little bit of health when you're inside of a fight before you help your squad mates. Once you have downtime and the fight is settled, you can easily heal up, but when you're inside of the action, you need to focus on the following. Always shield swap and be very aware of your squad mates' callouts. If you hear that someone's low on life and tries to escape, you shouldn't stick your syringe unless you really need it. Get that down and then you can assess the situation again and determine your next very move. You'll see a lot of pro players just pop a quick bat even when they're low life to then immediately rejoin the fight. There's simply not always the time to use that Phoenix kit you just happened to find on drop. Remember, every second can change the outcome of a fight. And that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see more Apex Legends content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.